Away from that story now, Nigerians are starting to express concerns about the impact of the federal government's threefold increase in the electricity tariff, which went from 68 naira per kilowatt hour to 225 naira. The cost of energy is still a major burden on the delivery of essential public services. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, NERC, raised Band A customers' electricity rates last week by more than 300%. From about 66 naira per kilowatt hour to 225 naira per kilowatt hour. Well, according to the Commission, only about 17% of the nation's electricity users who receive up to 20 hours of electricity each day will be impacted by the increase.
Businesses may face more difficulties as a result of the increase in tariffs, as well as other economic obstacles like the removal of fuel subsidies and the unification of foreign exchange rates. Nigerians are imploring the appropriate authorities to reevaluate this choice and investigate substitutes that give entrepreneurs requirements first priority and facilitate ease of doing business. This morning, we're joined by a lawyer and executive coordinator for NEPA WAHALA NG. He's Emeka Ojoko. Good morning, Ojoko, I beg your pardon. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Ojoko, you are the executive coordinator for NEPA WAHALA NG, and the number of Nigerians have reacted to this as Wahala. We don't understand. The number of people don't understand. Even though if we look at some of the data, the World Bank long ago had asked that the government cuts down the subsidy on electricity, as that would be one of the best ways to go. So first, is this a right direction, and is this a right time?
Well, on the first question, yes, it's the right direction. On the second question, there will actually never be a right time to get this done, but it needs to be done. Market forces, electricity is a commodity, right? And the combination of market forces typically give rise to the prices at which we buy power. Now, these factors, these indices have changed over time, but the tariff in Nigeria has remained static, right? And that lack of movement, either forward or backwards, right, has led to lack of growth in the industry, which is why we see the kind of level of power supply that we have in Nigeria now. Okay, various factors are responsible for this: the inflation rate, the price of gas. Okay, these things contribute. Well, and let's not also forget the exchange rate as well. Okay, as at December 2022, exchange rate was roughly about 400 and something naira, and right now it's about 1,400 naira to the dollar. Okay, and when these indices change and then the price of electricity remains static, it means that somebody is carrying that shortfall. Now, that somebody is the Nigerian government. Okay, they've been paying the subsidy for power for quite a long time now, right? But now the government's revenue is straightened, right? There's no money available for the government to continue carrying that shortfall, and so the government has said at this time that it can no longer carry the subsidy for 15% of the consumers, right, who account for 40% of the usage. So what the government has done now is basically to take away the subsidy for the Band A customers. Band A customers are people who typically enjoy 20 hours of supply above, and people who are in the higher income brackets of the society, and who typically, right, invest a lot of money in alternative power. Now, if this 15%, okay, start paying a more realistic price for power, then the thinking is that there will be more revenue available to the distribution segment of the industry to engage in metering and other infrastructure investments that can boost power supply across the value chain, so that eventually those on Band B, C, D, and E can eventually get up to Band A supply. Okay, so that's the thinking behind it. Now, my challenge with this is implementation, right? We've seen it happening with some discos who more or less put a lot of people on Band A who are not enjoying Band A supply. Okay, so people are now buying power at the rate of 225, and they are enjoying less than 20 hours a day, which is unfair, right? It's a practice which has been going on for a while, right? But because the price was not that high, people maybe were not making so much complaints. But now that it's 225, right? What you used to buy 10,000 naira would get, depending on your disc of course, would get you XYZ units, and now it's getting you much less. Then the outcry is out there. Okay, a lot of people are making noise about it, and it's understood. They should make these complaints, because that practice of billing people for supply that they do not enjoy is totally unfair. Now, NERC has not been very proactive about curtailing the discos excesses in this area, because they typically rely on what the discos tell them, right, in categorizing customers according to bands. Now, NERC needs to develop an independent mechanism of getting real-time data from customers on their supply, so that they can ensure that they are appropriately banded. And then this practice where discos steal money from customers by billing them higher than they should can stop. But as to whether or not it's the right thing to do, yes, electricity is inappropriately priced in this country. A friend was telling me that he lives in Benin Republic and Ibadan, and he was telling me that, look, that they pay about 350 a kilowatt hour, 350 naira a kilowatt hour in Benin Republic.
All right.
And we are the ones who supply them power. And then we pay for IBDC, we pay maybe 60 something naira or so. He wonders how the discos make money, you know. So, and if you check the stats around the world, you find that our power supply is actually one of the cheapest in the world as at then. But now it's more appropriately priced, and I trust that if the resources from the increase is properly applied, that at the end of the day, consumers will be the happier, because there will be an improvement in power supply across the board.
All right, Mr. Ojoko, I mean, you've said a lot, you've broken some of these points down, explaining why this needs to be done. There's no better time for it to have been done. But a lot of persons have said that it's like putting the cart before the horse, that shouldn't NERC or the power generating companies focus on ensuring that they can increase power in terms of what is being given to Nigerians before they go ahead to increase the tariffs? Don't you think that should have been done first, ensure that the power generation has increased away from 4,000 megawatts to possibly aiming at 10,000 before you now start going into putting persons or houses or Nigerians into bands? Your thought?
Okay. Currently, we have roughly 13,000 megawatts of installed capacity. So it's not really a question of generation, it's more a question of transmission and distribution. Okay, so our transmission and distribution infrastructure cannot carry, right, that amount of capacity if it is wheeled out on a daily basis. So the focus, as you say, yes, ought to be on improving transmission, which TCN has been doing over the past couple of years under the Siemens project, and then also improving distribution infrastructure. Now, part of the challenge here is this, that because of the metering gap, right, and the cost of metering, right, the discos really cannot afford the resources, right, to meter all customers. They cannot. Okay, so because of that, okay, you see across the board, all the discos are posting huge collections losses. Collections losses are the difference between the amount of power that they distribute and what they take back every month. Port Harcourt disco posts losses as high as 60%. That means they will have 100% and only get back at 40%. Now this is affecting the entire value chain. It's affecting the generation, the gencos. You notice that around January there was this sharp drop in power supply across the nation. Now this was not grid collapse, which we have seen about 2-3 of this year, but this was the fact that the gencos were shorter in supply. Okay, because of unpaid invoices, they stopped supplying. The gas company stopped supplying the gencos because sufficient revenue was not coming up the value chain to sort out their invoices. The government had to get involved to pay part of those bills, but there's still a huge amount of money outstanding, right? And this gas, right, they can actually get the market outside the country, but they're trying to supply to the Nigerian industry, and they're not getting sufficient revenue from the industry. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. Which comes first? Granted, the discos, they had metering targets when they took over this, when the investors took over this company, but over time they have failed woefully to meet those targets. Failed woefully. Okay, they talk about 12 million customers on the grid, right? That figure, as I'm sure you know, is not realistic. Okay, it doesn't reflect the true amount of consumers on ground, but they may have maybe 12 million registered customers. But the figures are much larger than that. Now, how many people are out there, right, who are taking part from the grid and who are not registered on the grid as paying customers? Now, these people they are talking about, they're enjoying power, but who are they paying to? They're not paying to the discos, but they are paying to somebody, because if they don't pay, they'll be disconnected. Okay. Now, this speaks to the corruption which is endemic in the sector. There are people out there who are feeding fat every month, taking monies from people who are illegally connected to the grid. And this money should be getting into the value chain. But
Mr. Ojoko, just to quickly
yes.
interject, permit me to interject. You've mentioned these people who are paying fees to people other than the distribution companies. Is there a way, do we have a mechanism to track them? Because we hear stories of people going into a new apartment and then you're being told that there's a backlog of electricity bill to pay, maybe ranging in the thousands or in the millions. So is there a way to track them? And if yes, what moves are being made, if any, to be able to recover these outstanding debts?
One of the things that the discourse for the NERC do, maybe to engage independent consultants to assist them with this, because the people responsible for this aspect of tracking people illegally connected are typically disco staff, right? They're the ones who benefit from this very huge pool of consumers who are illegally connected and who pay them off every month so that they can remain illegally connected. Okay, now if you check across all the discos, they have huge debt on their books, huge, humongous, and the largest pool of debtors again is the government. We saw the case of UCH that was disconnected over debt as it going. We saw the case of Asorok that was disconnected. This cuts across the board. The military formations are among the highest debtors. But which disco staff is going to walk into the embarrassment now? Who say they want to go and do a disconnection, right? So these are the challenges that are in the sector. There is a huge liquidity crisis, which, if not dipped in the board, right, will lead to the sector eventually becoming totally comatose, and we are the ones who will suffer. Okay, we are the ones who will suffer. The cost of alternative power supply now is prohibitive. Very, very few people can afford to go green, to go to alternative energy supply. So at the end of the day, we all have to fall back to the grid. But if the discos are not making profit, right? If the industry is not sustainable, then we cannot attract the needed investment to boost infrastructure. You see the footage now that's going out there of these lines that crisscross the cities. Ideally, this line should be underground. There should be modern distribution facilities running across the country. But the resources are not there. The banks will not advance further funds to the discos. In fact, most of the discos have been taken over by the lenders, right? Because they couldn't meet up with the obligations. Okay, so there is a huge liquidity crisis, a part of which has been caused by the tariffs that have historically been lower than what the cost price of electricity is, right? But now the government is finally trying to correct it, and we are hoping that they will stay the course. But at the same time, we're also hoping that our leaders can be a bit more empathetic, right? People are going to suffer during this period, right? People are suffering, and they are going to suffer a little bit more. Our leaders should be a bit more empathetic, right? The optics that we see coming out from Abuja and other places where people who are supposed to be are showing us an example, people are supposed to be making laws, right, to make our lives better, are living fat, and then the rest of us having to grapple with these things, right? It doesn't look like it leaves a sour taste in the mouth, and these are the reasons why the majority of Nigerians have lost trust and faith right, in the ability of this government to do the right thing, even though this is actually the right thing for the government to do now.
Okay.
Right. Eventually, if Nigeria gets back on the prosperity trajectory, some of these subsidies can come back. All over the world, power is subsidized. But in those countries, in those economies, the economies are typically doing better than Nigeria. So we really cannot afford a subsidy now. But our leaders should also cut their costs, as they're expecting us to also cut our cloth according to our side.
All right. I mean, Mr. Ojoko, like I said, you've taken time to break these things down. But then again, many are also asking, now that you have the tariff, you do have Nigerians who are wondering how they're going to survive. What's your take on how this could affect the informal sector, especially now that the economy is dwindling?
Okay, one of the quick effects that we're going to see is this, that I expect that a lot of people have said that the prices of goods and services will increase, but that may not actually be the fact, right? Because most of the industries, most of the manufacturers they're on band A supply, right? But they don't get, well, they are categorized as band A customers, but they don't get band A supply. Now, NERC has put in place orders and regulations to ensure that they get appropriate supply. So if the manufacturers now are getting 20 plus hours a day, it means that they can now get off alternative supply. The cost of diesel generation far outstrips the cost of public utility supply. So if they can downplay diesel, it means that there can be a cost reduction, right, in the production of goods and services. So I expect that in the short to medium term, this will actually bring down the cost of goods and services. If companies can wean themselves off their diesel generation, right? So if that happens, right, we see things becoming cheaper in the market, and then, right, we see companies being able to scale up, we see an increase in employment. Believe me, if I'm a manufacturer and I'm able to, I'll use myself as a typical example. If I have 20 hours of supply in my law firm, the amount that I spend on generation every day will come drastically down. I can employ more people to work for me because my operating costs are lower. So I expect to see that in the short to medium term across in the manufacturing sector. Now, if our manufacturers are doing better, they can produce more, right? It means more income, more tax to the government. So rather than, contrary to what people are thinking, that this will make goods and services to go higher, it will actually lead to a decrease in the price of goods and services if the discos can actually guarantee 20 hours of supply a day to the band A customers. And that's the big if. That's the big if. I'm on band A myself, but I can't say that I'm seeing that kind of supply where I live.
Well, we hope. We join you in hoping with the word if, the condition, if they can provide the band A, if, because we do not want to hear that the power stations are shutting down, which seems to be a regular feature. But on this note, we want to say thank you so much for talking to us, Emeka Ojoko, lawyer and executive coordinator for NEPA WAHALA NG. Before you go, I wanted to ask, what's the WAHALA in NEPA? Are you looking at the WAHALA challenges that Nigerians are facing with the company?
My brother, the WAHALA is everywhere. I've been battling these discourse since 2018 on issues like this, right? I got into this because I discovered that, man, they are cheating people. They are cheating people on a regular basis, banking on people's ignorance. So I decided to just devote my time to just educating people about their rights in the electricity sector, and then actively helping them to defend those rights, right? So that's why I'm here today. I'd like to assure consumers out there that the few changes that have been made in recent by this administration seem to be on the right track, right? Electricity has been decentralized. It's no longer a federal government affair. So different states can get into the act of generating, transmitting, and distributing within their sector. The state government should get their act together, okay? Because it's only competition that can solve the problems in the sector, right? And the right move has been made by this government to decentralize the power sector.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You.